On today's episode of Chronicles of a Nigerian Woman, I'll be reading Grace's story. Please take a listen. I want to use my story to draw attention to something that happens to quite a number of people, but is very little spoken about. I am 36 and I have been married for 12 years. I have 3 children. My story started in my childhood. I grew up with my paternal grandparents along with my younger brother. I started living with them at the age of 6. My father had become a drug addict in the village where we all lived. My mother was our sole carer, and she did her best to provide for us all. She was a very hard-working woman, and she was in the palm oil trade. Things started to get out of hand when my father started stealing her money to feed his addiction. When she hid the money away from his reach, he would threaten her until she had no other choice than to give him what she had. He never hit her, thankfully, but his threats became more and more menacing, and eventually she ran out of money. It affected everything. After a while, my grandparents asked her to leave us with them so that she could be free to look for work and move on with her life since she was still under 30. She left the village and went to Lagos to get domestic work, and she would visit us from time to time and send money for our upkeep. Eventually, she got married again, and she settled down with her new family, even though she continued to visit and support our upkeep. It was hard on me, but I came to accept that it was our lot in life. My grandparents tried their best, but they were very strict, religious and moralistic people, and so our upbringing was tough. It was good in the sense that we stood out from most of the children in the village and didn't get into any mischief. But we went through some very harsh experiences, and one of them is what has led me to share this story. The day I turned 12, my grandmother called me privately and had a talk about periods and pregnancy. She didn't say much, except that I should expect to start seeing blood anytime from then, and that I was never to let a boy or a man touch me. Otherwise, I would get pregnant and my life would be destroyed. God knows I did not understand what she meant, but I was afraid and filled with deep apprehension. My period started over a year later, and I became very conscious of myself. I told my grandmother, and she reminded me of her warning, which I took literally. I was 15 when the worst happened. A boy in my class had been trying to get my attention, but I did all I could to stay away from him. I even insulted him. On the day in question, I was walking home after school when he came from behind me and put his arm around me, touching my breast. I managed to hit him with my school bag and I ran home crying. I was still crying when my grandmother got home 2 hours later. The way things went from there is something I will regret for the rest of my life. She asked me what happened, and I told her amidst loud sobs. She asked if that was all, and when I said yes, she did not believe me. She insisted that more must have happened for me to be crying the way I was. And no matter what I said, she did not believe me. She took me to her room and asked me to strip naked. I was embarrassed, but I did what she said. She then asked me to lie on the bed and spread my legs wide so that she could check to see if I had done anything else. I couldn't believe it. I cried and begged, but she would not listen. And she took a cane and whipped me, which forced me to do what she said. I felt shame, utter shame. It did not end there. When my grandfather came back from church that evening, she told him, and they both agreed that I should visit the local nurse. I missed school the next day because I had to go to the nurse's house, and she repeated the same thing my grandmother did the day before, except that I did not strip naked. I only raised my dress above my hips. She confirmed to my grandmother after checking that nothing happened, and I got scolded again by her about the risk of pregnancy. That was how my fear of men began. I got to understand what my grandmother meant by a man touching me, and I developed a deep apathy for the entire concept. I got married at the age of 24, a couple of years after completing my OND. I moved to Lagos from our village in Ogun State, and I was working as a receptionist. I met my husband in church, and we were both virgins. The first week of our marriage was the most harrowing experience of my life after what happened. I love my husband, but I was filled with apprehension about what I knew must come after the wedding. I had never discussed the incident that happened in my teenage years with anyone, not even him, because I hated to remember it. But as our wedding drew nearer, I knew I had to confront it, and I was scared. What I did not know was the extent to which it had affected me. When he first tried to consummate our marriage, everything was fine until he tried to touch me down there, and I recoiled. I felt my muscles tighten involuntarily. We tried everything we had heard, but all I felt was pain and tightness each time he made an attempt. I became tense all around my genital area, and I felt the muscles tighten like someone was squeezing the life out of me. It was so painful, I would end up in tears. We stopped trying after the first week, and then waited 2 weeks before trying again, but it was the same thing. We went to the clinic after over a month of trying, and that was when I was diagnosed with vaginismus, an involuntary tensing of the vaginal muscles. The doctor said my case was quite severe. In the course of questioning, I shared the story of what happened to me, and he identified that as the cause. I was referred to a gynecologist and then a psychologist. I was given some drugs to help me at the beginning, and then I went through counseling with the psychologist for about 3 months before I was healed completely. It was during that time that I got to know that it happens to quite a number of women, although many other people do not know about it. And that is why I decided to share my own experience. Have you heard of the term vaginismus? The truth is, there are no statistics on the number of women who are affected by this because too many people are embarrassed to share. What are your thoughts about grace and her experience, or vaginismus in itself? Please share in the comments below. Also remember to like this video, to subscribe, and to share with anybody who will find it useful. If you'd like to join a vibrant group of women where we share ideas and other activities that can help us thrive, please click the link in the description below to join the Valiant Women's Network. Till I come your way again next time. Ciao!